Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's EA View on the archetype of Sagittarius. My name is Rav Chahal, and I'm joined by a wonderful panel of astrologers and teachers. Firstly, I'd like to welcome back a regular face, but she's not been with us for a few talk shows, but I'm great that she's come back in this month, especially because she embodies the whole Sagittarius archetype, and that's Stacie Pazura. Hi, Stacie.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
David this month is taking a break, but I've got my regular panel joining us again. It's Kristin Fontana.
Hey guys.
I've got Jordyn Smith.
Hi.
And Bess Strzelecki.
Hey everyone.
So this month we are talking about Sagittarius. And there's a reason why we titled it The Wisdom of Sagittarius. It's because Sagittarius is a natural sign in the zodiac. It's a fire sign, it's yang energy, and it's mutable. And for me, I see Sagittarius as the free spirit of the zodiac. Its wisdom lies in its freedom to explore, freedom to just expand its knowledge by whatever means it desires. And especially in evolutionary astrology, Sagittarius links to natural law. And there's a great article in the Journal of Evolutionary Astrology written by Stacie herself. So please get a copy of that. The link will be provided in the description below. It gives you a background into what natural law is. I've taken a statement out of the article just to show you. So what is natural law? These are timeless, universal principles that have been set in motion by the divine source to sustain, order, and govern an evolving creation. These laws, by nature, are centered around giving, sharing, and inclusion, and they are universal and timeless. I actually wanted Stacie to expand a little bit on that statement because when I read the article, it was such great grounding into what natural law is, and especially linked to the archetype of Sagittarius. So we'd love to hear a little bit more from you about that.
Yeah, sure. In terms of natural law being centered around giving, sharing, and inclusion, one thing that's really important to understand is that within the totality of creation, every single entity has a co-equal function within the whole. And so there is no better than. There's, every distinct entity, every person, every soul has their own specific, unique purpose and way of expressing themselves and way of helping, talents that can be applied. One thing that correlates to all of this is the daemon soul, which we talk about in EA quite a bit, which is a soul type that it's a soul type that where consciousness is fused with the totality of nature. And really, the evolutionary process for a daemon soul is to decondition from everything that is not authentic to the self. And one thing that you'll find with daemon souls is that in general, because of the fusion of consciousness with the totality, there is a natural humility and a natural unassuming nature. Daemon souls will often find relating to ants, or not ants, plants and animals a little easier than people, primarily because with animals and plants, life is simple. There are no assumptions. There aren't games. What you see is what you get. And I think it's important to give a shout out to the daemon souls out there because it's tough incarnating into a world where society kind of has its issues being in harmony with nature. The daemon soul is going to have unconscious memories of being in evolved societies that have evolved through harmonizing with nature. So in other words, the society evolves because of the alignment with nature. And imagine what could be possible if we were doing that now. And so for daemon souls, we all chose this time to be here. And one of the really important things in that is so that we can help in any way that's needed, through that ability to relate to those who don't have voices, who don't use the human language, but who can intuit the needs of other entities.
Yeah, it's brilliantly explained. And even on our next slide, which Jordyn will explain in a second, you talk about linking the daemon archetype, linking to infusing with nature, animals, and being one. You know, the Sagittarius image, astrological symbol, is a centaur, half horse, half human. And for me, that reflects the equality on Earth of both humans and animals and plants. Just, you know, and it's like they're one in a way. You know, there is no separation, and it's not one having dominance over the other. So yeah, you've explained that brilliantly in terms of how it is about reawakening that within every single one of us in our consciousness, just going back to a time that there was just, you know, sharing, caring, and inclusion, as you said. And yeah, so this picture of the grasshopper, which was taken by Jordyn herself. Jordyn, do you just want to explain how you ended up taking this picture in the first place and what it represents to you?
Yeah, so I have a little garden by my office that I talk to my friends about how I just coexist with nature there. And this little guy showed up and hung out with me, and I asked him, like, can I take your picture? Can I pet you? And, you know, he let me, or she, who knows? But I was really enthralled whenever I saw this little creature, because I think it really represents what you guys are talking about, like the sentience of life. Like, there's no life that's more, you know, better than, less than, or I mean, you can look at this guy and you can see, like, look at his eyes. He is speaking to you, you know, he's saying, like, hey, I'm a little scared, but like, if it's pure emotion, it's like, if you can connect with animals or insects or plants and show that you are loving and compassionate and that you view them through the lens of inclusion, you can coexist with them, and they want to coexist with us. And I felt like this was a really good representation, because he hung out with me all throughout my meditation, and just, you know, he could have hopped away, but he didn't. So yeah, and he let me snap this awesome picture.
I have to add something. Hey, Rob, I want to add something, because
Of course.
most people who've been watching this show for a while, at the very beginning, we decided we all wanted to talk about our power animals. I don't remember at what point that was. So we all have nicknames, like Stacie's Little Wolf, and Dave is Bunny D, and I'm Chris Stallion, and Rob is Rovnix for the Phoenix, and Bess is Panther B. And I asked Jordyn, I'm like, okay, so what's your power animal? Talking about all things equal, I almost fell out of my chair when you said that the possum was your power animal. So not a lot of people are going to choose the possum. So why don't you let people know why you chose the possum? Because you are Jord awesome.
That's right. I chose the possum, one, because out in my little garden, I have a possum that crosses my fence line every night, and I have dogs, and one of them is, I swear it, this is like his first life ever being domesticated. So I'm like, you know, really like, hey, but this possum, it like trusts me, and so I've gotten to observe her, and like, she's such a good mother. Like, she literally will carry her babies on her back and get them to safety, and you know, they're blind, they can't really find their food or anything, and she can't leave them by themselves because of natural predators. And so she just carries them with her until they reach adulthood. And she also reminds me that it's time to go inside, that I need to go inside and hang out with my own kids, you know, that I've been studying, or I've been, you know, we just have this connection, and I feel really connected to her. I did want to say something. A lot of people don't know that possums are like the only marsupials here in the United States, and they serve a great function, which is like they're the ones who eat the ticks. And so people in like mountainous areas, like they're one of the only creatures who really keeps the tick population down. And so they serve a purpose, and they are often misunderstood. And I think that I relate to that as well. And
Awesome.
yeah, I just think that they're like the coolest little creatures ever.
Definitely.
That's awesome.
Because like you just said, everything serves a purpose. So there's always a reason behind every, you know, animal that you meet in nature, individuals, whoever you connect with, and there's your Sagittarius, embodying everybody as one and as a whole. Even within Sagittarius, it's archetype. You know, I've listed a few keywords on the screen. You know, it's about expansion, beliefs, philosophy. You know, it represents the right brain, which is intuitive. It's the explorer within us. You know, we need that freedom. We want that freedom to travel. And I was actually watching Kristin and Ari's recent video on Uranus in the ninth house, which is naturally Sagittarius and Sagittarius house. And it was just you explaining how it was all to do with having the freedom to travel, but it could also be traveling within the mind, not just being limited to a left brain thinking process, and just allowing that intuitive nature to open up. And yeah, so just expanding your horizons, that multicultural aspect, you know, linking to the international countries. You know, even today, you all are sitting in America, and I'm in London. You know, we're connecting on this platform, expanding our own knowledge and experiences as well. And yeah, and it's also the nomad within all of us. You know, though we seek security and we seek to want to know our place, there's also always a small part of us within us, which is the nomad, and that's wherever Sagittarius will be in your natal birth chart, is where you seek that exploration, that growth, and that expansion. So it's always good to know where you have Sagittarius in your natal chart, and all these attributes will link to that. Yes.
Wanted to add something really important about the Sag archetype that is so helpful for people, whether they've got a moon in Sag, planets in the ninth, or any planet in Sag, where they're especially, or Sag planets in the fourth house. A lot of times, well, the Sagittarius archetype is the archetype too of alienation and not really feeling at home anywhere. And so when there'll be souls who are like trying to find their place. So let's look at the astrocartography, you know, where are my lines good? And, you know, when I see this prominent aspect, it's important to always share that you will never feel totally at home anywhere, because you are always looking to the next horizon for one reason, but also because of that nomadic energy. Yes, that need to expand, but that gypsy spirit really is learning that home is where you are. Home is wherever you are. And I remember Jeffrey used to talk about, you know, whenever he would travel, he would bring a big Native American blanket that he would put on top of the hotel bed. You know, he would bring candles, he would bring a Yogananda book, you know, he would bring things. He's got all these prominent Sagittarius energy and a fourth house moon, but bring things that would bring the teepee into the place that he was staying. So literally the home was on his back and needed to be. So I think when you learn that home is wherever you go, I think that's important for all of us anyway, as we learn to cultivate our own inner sense of emotional security and that foundation within us. You know, that's very helpful in your life when you are at a place that may not feel like your place or your home. So I think it just allows those souls to kind of release attachment to needing to find one place for them.
Well, Kristin, you've just validated my experience. My fourth house cusp is Sagittarius.
Oh, all right. Maybe you need to move to the States though.
I've been told I'll be moving sometime, but let's see. Let's see if it's in the stars. Yeah, so just moving on. We have coming up in December, on December the 7th, the full moon in Gemini. And we're going to have Jordyn, who's going to start us off explaining what this transit's all about.
Yes, I was really trying to tap into this last night. Because I'm Sag and I fly by the seat of my pants usually, but I really wanted to, I wrote some stuff down here, pulling in that Gemini, I think. But whenever I was looking at this chart, and before I get into a lot of the aspects, there was a couple of things that kind of kept coming into my head as I looked at it, right? Which was there, I believe Wolf stated this, I read this somewhere. But this chart really speaks to, especially with the full moon being conjunct Mars and retrograde. And this is pulling in Saturn because there's a trine happening from this full moon to Saturn. And we know that Saturn is squaring these nodes still. And so the wolf euphemism that I heard was repeat in order to resolve, right? This full moon is about a culmination of something, but there's a repeating or a reviewing of some sorts that could be coming up for some in regards to this. And this full moon really, I feel like, expresses the need to have more of independent thinking from things. This moon is conjunct Mars, it's retrograde, so there can be a conversation or something that we can express coming up where we're reviewing it, but there's a need to independently think, maybe especially because this moon is ruled by Mercury in the sign of Capricorn, where we might have been conditioned, and so we're over identified with the definition of something or defining how one thing went or another. And so really with this square, there's a T-square happening between this full moon Mars to Jupiter and Neptune, and then also from Jupiter to Neptune to Venus and the Sun. When I was looking at this, it made me think of, it's something I have said so many times, it's very Jupiterian, but there's more than one way to get to Denny's, right? So we can't be over-identified with how we've defined something, and that there is relativity to truth about things. That what is true for me might not be true for Kristin. It might not be true for Bess or Rav or Stacie, And so there's this need to get away from the illusion of that we need to really look at where we've over-identified with, conditioned values or needs, and really looking at whether or not those are really something that resonates on a soul level, or if it's something that we've kind of been indoctrinated into, right? And so with this full moon and a trine to Saturn, I feel like this really gives us that objectivity that we're needing to really kind of sort through this. And there is this other quality with this full moon, especially with Mars, that if a conversation does come up that someone's needing to have, that Mars retrograde really, for me, from what I've come to understand, is about, how am I trying to articulate this? There's a need to be responsive instead of reactive, right? So if we're having a conversation, if we're being objective, then we are gaining the independence and the freedom to really look at something and to make a choice to be responsive instead of reactive. And so, really kind of weighing everything and making sure that we are in alignment with who we are. And there's this semi-sextile going on between the moon and the North Node conjunction with Uranus. And this can be, I think a little scary or tense for people. It's that feeling of something's new, but just because something's new doesn't mean that we're incapable of doing it. And I think that this is really, a lot of us are understanding what our own intrinsic needs and values are. And from that, we're shaping new beliefs. And so this is like the show up time. The universe is giving us an opportunity to say, are we going to apply these across the board with how we communicate to other people? Are we able to live in our integrity, in our authenticity? And so I wanted to see, I think that it's really important that there is, especially with the Gemini full moon and the culmination, that there could be a need to really to move the energy, especially with Mars conjunct this, to be able to express this in some way. I was talking to Bess last night about, you know, people who, if they want to do ritual or they work with the moon cycles, you know, something that someone could do is to dance or to write or to journal or something that just gets that energy moving so that it's not stagnating and building up. And yeah, I wanted to know if you guys had any other thoughts on this. Yes.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we think about Gemini, we think about two, right? Two choices.
Yep.
And in life, we do typically have two choices. We have a choice to go left or right, which to me reflects the light or the opposite of the light, right?
Mhm.
Every light casts a shadow, and every one of us knows that when we have a desire to do something, we know if it's in light or not, right? And we're all living in this world of duality. We're all pulled, and we can always feel the shadow right behind us. There's not a soul that I talk to that doesn't experience this in one way or the other. So when you see Mars balsamic to the moon in Gemini, you have two choices. Maybe you have more than two choices, but two primary choices. One that really reflects your evolution moving forward, and one behind you that does not. So balsamic to the moon reminds us too, with a full moon, that we can only evolve through the emotional body. So these choices must be made from a deeper emotional place. As the ruler Mercury is in Capricorn, this requires a commitment, not halfway, but all the way. Evolution requires that kind of commitment all the way. Or we idle and we stagnate. And as you said, Jordyn, then these themes can repeat. So a lot of people are coming back to a place in their path that maybe they've been before, and that this is a time through Mercury and Capricorn to make an incredible long-term commitment. And, you know, with Venus in a new phase to that Mercury, I mean, this is literally rooted in what's true, what's best for you, and having zero attachments to anything except what is true, period. So even if it's a relationship that you're in and it's not a good relationship, it's not attaching to that relationship at all, just attaching to what's best for you. What's true for you will be best for you both, is an example of that.
Yeah.
And lastly,
I was
real quick,
looking at that square also to Juno. I think I heard you once say like asteroids sweeten the pot, and I really feel like that
Yeah.
square to Juno definitely does. I know that we always talk about like illusions and, you know, like the misty qualities of Neptune, but it's also the actual truth of something that comes from just standing back and looking at it, because it is the culmination of the signs. And I do think that absolutely. And it could be dealing with relational dynamics. Like, are you looking at the truth? Not what you wish it was, you know, not what you hope it to be, but what is actually occurring.
One visual, I can't even say the word visual. Yeah, one thing to visualize with Jupiter at 29 degrees Pisces, which is the ruler of the sun and Venus in Sag. It is 29 degrees. It's the last degree before coming into Aries, which I think it's around the 22nd of December that happens. But the Jupiter will not be back for 12 years. And it is in a new phase to Neptune, which Jupiter is in Pisces and the ruler is Neptune. So it's culminating something at the same time it's brand new. So something must heal, something must culminate, something must come to fruition before the new thing can happen. And that does take, you know, putting something to rest, surrendering, closing a door, close the damn door.
I always feel like 29 degrees is like dotting I's and crossing T's, you know? Or it's like the finesse at the very end, like icing the cake, you know, putting the finishing touches before you can actually, you know, move on.
Okay, I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll just leave it.
Absolutely.
To go on. But I just thought of something else that is just so powerful when you're working with a client. And let's just say hypothetically, every time they talk to their mom, they feel like they're 7 again. Like, or You know, when you come back for the holidays and who was it who said this? Ram Dass, I think, said, anytime you're feeling enlightened, go spend a week with your family. Because it will literally make you feel like you haven't evolved at all. Like one word can just like create such a one look from a certain family member and you're back at another time in your life. But anyway, so I'll talk to clients. We'll just say it's a mother issue. And I'm hearing, I mean, they may be in their 40s or 50s or 60s, and maybe not 60s because maybe mom's not here anymore, but and they'll talk about these you know, this need to still be loved by their mother in a certain way, and yet maybe the mother is just super judgmental and it's never enough. It's never, always complaining, and so they're maintaining this relationship in a very childlike way, needy way. And one question always gets them: do you want this mother in your next life? Of course they don't. It's horrible. It's like they didn't feel like they've been nurtured their whole life. So what does this full moon conjunct Mars, balsamic to the moon, mean? Speak those words you need to speak.
Absolutely.
Close the door. Like, say, you know what? I'll tell you, and take responsibility for the fact that you chose that mother for your own evolution. It was your responsibility, and it really, I mean, you chose this dynamic so you could evolve. So there aren't any victims. There's no need to blame the mom. It's just accepting the mom for who she is or where she's at. And I'm just using the mom as a hypothetical. It could be any family member where you're feeling like you're always needing more emotion, needing more connection, and it just never changes. So if you don't want the same dynamic with somebody that you are emotionally connected to return in another life, deal with it now, deal with it today. Say what you've been wanting to say, mean what you say, and say what you mean.
Yeah, I definitely think it's also kind of like asking oneself, you know, am I willing to continue to play this position in my life as well, in this role with this family member, you know?
Right.
So,
I mean, the thing is that the powerful transits, whether it's a full moon, an eclipse, a Pluto transit, these are the transits that propel us forward. Look at Uranus conjunct the North Node in Taurus with the ruler Venus being in Sag. This is transformative. This can be a potential breakthrough on the other side of a very intense November. So, you know, visualize, what is it that I want to change? Not just a little bit, but just, you know, rip the Band-Aid off kind of thing. Just absolutely turn and burn. Let's go, you know, be done with it already. So that's what we can do under this full moon transit for sure.
Beautiful. Anything else anybody wants to add? Or we can move on to the Bess, who will talk about the herb of the month linked to this full moon.
Yeah, so the herb of the month is sage, and it's ruled by Jupiter. And sage's scientific name is salvia, which comes from the Latin, which means to heal or to save, which is not a coincidence. It's one of the most healing herbs there are out there, and there's over 900 species of sage. So it's a pretty incredible plant. It's used mostly to treat excess sweating, toning the nervous system, helps with menopause. It's one of the best natural antibiotics we have. It's great for food poisoning, helps heal ulcers, wounds. It's one of my favorite things to do with sage is to use it as a mouthwash. You can add it with salt water, and it's incredible at treating your gums and gingivitis or any sort of oral infections. It's great for the throat and tonsils. Stacie, I know you're a little bit under the weather too. I have been also. They make these like sage and aloe throat sprays, which are great. And even just like drinking sage tea is great for the throat. But it's really great at calming the nerves and getting into the Sag, the sort of like mental, intuitive archetype. It's incredible for mental fatigue and memory loss. There's really interesting studies around working with sage to stave off Alzheimer's and to maintain sort of like a really strong mental longevity. there's a quote that's old that says, "Why should a man die who has sage in his garden?" It's a really old English superstition, but basically, sage is supposed to promote longevity and wellness of life, and it is a great. A lot of people use sage for aromatherapy purposes when they're studying or trying to get mental clarity, or like, if you want to use it around this full moon or around Sag new moons, it helps you sort of get centered mentally and like turn on the intuitive right brain piece, I would say. There's also really interesting research around sage with diabetes. It balances insulin and helps with sort of like any sort of gastric issues you might have going on. So it's a really incredible herb, and I would say the sort of magical properties of it, people know that it's been used for a very long time. People burn sage for ritual, and some of that is to, the thought is, I think it works physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, right? Like the physical is it's a very strong sort of like antibiotic. It kills off any negative sort of things in the room. So it's really strong for clearing space. Mentally, it helps you sort of get aligned and in tune and sort of more in that right brain practice. And spiritually, it's said to be able to create sacred space and get clarity and start connecting with spirit. So there are some people, my husband included, who cannot stand the smell of it, and they make these handy sage sprays that you can use as well. But yeah, so have fun with sage this month.
What is a sage spray? What is that?
Oh, it's sage essential oil, and then it's mixed with filtered well water and grain alcohol, basically. So it's just a herbal spray.
What do you use it for?
You can just spray the room, spray yourself. It's great. Just gets you into the sage smell, cleanses the space. It's like it's sort of like burning sage. It's similar.
Okay, so then your husband's okay with that, just not the
Yeah,
smoke.
this is much better. The smell is different than the smoke. I take this, I mean, speaking of Jeffrey and taking the TP with you, I mean, I bring this, you can't like burn sage in hotel rooms without setting off the smoke detector. So I always have a bottle of sage spray, and that's the first thing I do is spray my hotel room when I get in there.
Where do you get that?
This one I bought from the Shaman's Market, which is shamansmarket.com. And this was recommended to me by one of my shamanic teachers that I love.
Okay, one other question.
Yeah.
The essential oil of sage, and you is that what you use when you're making the mouthwash for your gums?
No, actually, I do just the sage tea and then add a little bit of salt water and then let it cool, and you can just use it. You can use essential oil. I would say make sure it's diluted and test it and go slower, but sure. And here's the other thing. Dalmatian sage has there are certain types of sages, Dalmatian sage included, that have a chemical compound called thujone, which is a little bit harder on the liver. So you just want to make sure, like, because essential oils are so condensed and they're so powerful, just go slow with those. Spanish sage and Greek sage are sort of more common medicinally because they're a little bit easier on the liver for the healing properties.
So what kind of tea do you recommend? What brand?
Oh, I mean, I'm drinking sage tea right now, and I like the Cretan tea. I like Cretan's like wild sage tea is my favorite.
Sounds good.
But I mean,
Well,
sage is on almost everybody's kitchen cabinet, so like add some to your meal, Just
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to add an interesting story. Just my best friend, she is 6 planets in Sagittarius. It's her birthday next week. She had her tonsils removed about 6 years ago. She suffers every year from tonsillitis pain, and the doctors are like, you don't have any tonsils, it's not tonsil pain. She was like, it is, it's like a phantom pain, and she's been suffering this week really badly, and the doctors are just like, you'll get over it. I am going to message her and saying, sage tea now, wherever you are, just go drink it, buy it, just
and
yeah.
Gaia Herbs makes this sage and aloe spray, which I like. You can just sort of like
I just feel like her Sagittarius side just needed this lecture today to open up to that side of the world. But yeah, I will let her know your wisdom. Thank you for that. Yeah, so moving on, we have our fingerprint of the month, which is Tina Turner. It is actually her birthday today. And if I got my maths correct, I believe she's 83. Is that correct?
Believe that. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. I had to literally check him, like, are you sure she's 83? But yeah, 83 years old and a wonderful artist. And Bess, if you just want to give us a little bit of background, then we can dive into her chart.
Sure. So she was born Anna Mae Bullock in Nutbush, Tennessee. She had two older sisters. She sang in the choir. It was sort of a rural town. She grew up, picking cotton. She was a daughter of sharecroppers. Her parents had an abusive relationship, and her mother left when she was 11 months old. 11 years old, sorry. And that was the year transiting Pluto went over her ascendant. And then shortly thereafter, the father left, didn't send money back, didn't send clothes, didn't check on him, just left. So she was raised by a grandmother. And when the grandmother died, when she was 16, she then went to go live in with her mother in St. Louis. And that was when transiting Uranus was conjunct her natal Pluto. But so in St. Louis, she started going to the nightclub scene with her sister, and that's where she saw Ike Turner play. And he was a sort of an up and coming, he's sort of given the name of like being the father of, rhythm and blues, like R&B. And so he would play, and she said she went into a trance watching him play. And one day, she asked if she could sing with him, and he sort of blew her off. And one day the drummer put down the mic and she just picked it up and started singing, and it knocked it out of the park. I mean, it knocked Ike's socks off, and he basically invited her to become, a singer in the band. And she eventually, actually, he wrote a song for another artist to record, and she was supposed to sing backup, and that artist didn't show up that day. So she recorded the song, and Ike thought that he was just going to replace her vocals later, but they were so amazing that the label loved it and said, keep it. And so she produced her first single called A Fool in Love with Ike in 1960 in July. And Uranus had just gone over her ascendant then, and they went on, they became this band, and they went on this crazy tour. Ike managed it. They went 90 days straight doing 4 shows a night. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then Tina recorded her first single. Ike managed everything, and he was sort of like very controlling as a manager in the band. But she recorded her first single, River Deep Mountain High, without Ike. And that was when transiting Saturn and Chiron conjuncted her Jupiter and that was in the spring of 66. And the record label basically paid to keep Ike away. And that was her first taste of what it was like to create for herself. And it was very Sagittarian, very successful overseas, not so much in the States, but she started to get superstardom status like overseas. And it allowed her to tour with the Rolling Stones in 66. It's been rumored that she taught Mick Jagger how to dance when she was on tour with him. And then in November of 1967, she became the first female artist and the first Black artist to appear on the cover of the Rolling Stones magazine. And, she's Leo rising, like known for her big hair and dance moves. And she's now known as sort of like the queen of rock and roll. She continued to play. They had a big smash hit called Proud Mary in 1971. And then 1972, they opened a recording studio. And that's when the pressure sort of got on, and Ike became addicted to cocaine, and he was very abusive, sort of like physically, sexually, mentally, all of the above. And the straw that broke the camel's back was in July 1st, 1976. Ike had planned to sign a new record deal, like it was like a 5-year deal or something, on the 5th of July. And flew to Dallas, and they were in the car on the way to the hotel, and he just sort of hit her for no reason out of the blue, and she decided to fight back then. And she got to the hotel room like beaten and bruised, and when he fell asleep, she left, and she had 36 cents in her pockets and a mobile gas card, and that was it. And that was when Saturn was conjunct her Pluto and her south node moved into her ninth house that day, and Neptune was sitting on her Mercury. And so she basically attributed her ability to leave him because she had been introduced to Buddhism and she was spending a lot of time chanting. And the mantra Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which is the life and fundamental law of the universe, it's a chant of mystical manifestation. Like, she attributes that to being able to get her out of it. And I think it took 2 years to get divorced from him. And she basically got nothing from court. He got all the music rights. He got, everything. And the only thing she said she was going to take was her name, which he gave her without even telling her, I think. Like, he made them Tina Turner, and Ike and Tina Turner Review basically was the band. And so, but she said, I'll take that name. And she went and basically had to start from scratch. She had 4 children to raise, 2 of which were his that she adopted and took on as her own. And she had all the bills, everything. So she started from scratch and basically played any hall that she could get. She was playing hotels and, whatever kind of like Vegas-y type things. And then she appeared on Olivia Newton-John's Hollywood Nights, and she convinced Newton-John's management team to take her on as a client, and they did. And one of the things that she did in December 7th, 1981, she opened up to People magazine about the abuse and sort of told her story, which she was really kind of terrified to do. Chiron was sitting on her Uranus, and her North Node was conjunct her Chiron then. And so then after, she kind of like had a clean slate. The public knew who she was because at that point she was older. She was in her 40s, and she was kind of seen as like a has-been a little bit. Then in 1983 she signed with Capitol Records, and then she recorded her album Private Dancer, which had What's Love Got to Do with It on it. And that was a hit. That was a song that had been sung by pop singers in the UK, and she made it her own, and it was a smash hit. And she ended up winning all kinds of Grammys for that album, including Album of the Year. And then in 85, she starred in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome with Mel Gibson. And then, she just sort of continued on and sang and toured. And she sold out stadiums like no female rock and roll musician has ever done. In 1993, she released her autobiography, I, Tina. And that was basically, she was tired of talking about Ike and the abuse. And so she took her story, she made it her own. Her North Node was sitting on her Mercury then. And then, Angela Bassett starred in What's Love Got to Do with It in 1993, which was a biopic. And then she had a musical that came out a few years ago. She retired at 60, and she now lives in Switzerland with her now husband. And that's sort of a wrap, I guess. It's hard to condense so much of her life. Her life is so incredible into
100%. She's lived such a colorful life, and longevity, and in the fact that her story is just, I use the word phenomenal because there was a quote that I read, and she actually said, people think my life has been tough, but I think it's been a wonderful journey. There's your Sagittarius, happy-go-lucky, looking at the positives, and she is a strong character, and we can see that with her chart placements. Stacie, I know you've picked to do Pluto retrograde in the 12th house and Leo for her. Do you want to start us off, and then we can build a conversation from that?
Yeah, sure. So with this signature Pluto in the 12th house in Leo, it's Pluto retrograde, by the way. And so Pluto retrograde is going to correlate to a lifelong sense of dissatisfaction and just being propelled to peel back the layers of false conditioning so that she can get down to her unique and natural self. With the South Node conjunct Saturn in the 9th house in Aries, we see that she has part of the barriers that she has had to work through are relative to interpretation And this has occurred by drawing authority figures into her life, whether it be parents, whether it be partners, who have projected their own judgments and visions of who they think she should be. And also organized religion that's rooted in the patriarchy being based on distortions of self-inclusion or self-interest and exclusion versus inclusion and giving and sharing. And one thing that we can see here is that we've got Mars in the 7th house, which is ruling the South Node and Saturn, and which is ruled by Neptune in the 2nd house in Virgo. And this really shows that the soul has been attracting these people because there is an unconscious guilt that is being carried around through the internalization of messages that others have had for her, where she has allowed other people to be in the driver's seat and to sort of serve as de facto gods of her own existence. And so Pluto is squaring the nodes, and that resolution node is the South Node in the 9th house. And so one of the ways that this has worked itself out in her life is through going through the experiences. And she even acknowledges that Ike was a pivotal force in her own self-discovery, where she views his control as a kind of training, where she's had to really tap into her own inner authority and let go of the beliefs that she should be expressing herself a certain way and listening to others. And then, of course, with the abuse, keeping it silent and just having to look at herself in the face after the repeated beatings and kind of living a lie. And through the cyclic experience of this, it has, she just reached a breaking point where her soul basically took charge and made a decision and said, enough, I'm in charge of my destiny. I'm leaving this marriage. All she kept was her name. She allowed him to have all of the assets, royalties. And to me, that reflects that 12th house placement of Leo, because she knows that the flow of creative energy or whatever talent isn't going to stop because it's within herself. And it just took that moment where, Ike went to beat her and she fought back and she left and she never turned back. And relative to the Buddhism that she embraced later in life, this has been really important for uncovering the skipped step, because one of the things this chanting has done for her is it has allowed her to integrate the right and left brain by suspending the mind and focusing the mind on that principle of manifestation, just stillness. And it kind of reminds me of something that I've heard Jeffrey Wolf Green advise people with Leo 5th house signatures, which is especially if you have internalized messages that say, you can't do it, you're not good enough, blah, 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 to repeat to yourself, I can and I want to. And so to me, this Buddhist chant that she has embraced is the same thing as that. It's just focusing the mind, I can and I want to. And by doing that, it has given her progressive freedom to just truly express who she is, to really refine her expression in her performing, and to really gain the self-pride of shaping her own life and walking away from the things that has held her back. So in my mind, she's well on her way to recovering that skipped step so that evolution can occur.
She's
Brilliant.
beyond the
Yeah.
square there.
What's that?
Sorry, Kristin?
Oh, she's beyond the square. She's moved beyond the exact square. If you do the exact square would have been Pluto at 28 Cancer. So she's 4 degrees past the exact square. So she's been working on this, right? Like you alluded, Stacie, for some lifetimes. But things she's still pretty, 4 degrees after that exact square, there's still a lot of eruption there. And so she covered a lot of ground for sure in this lifetime. We didn't talk about stage of evolution, but what do you guys think?
Third stage consensus with a foot into first stage individuated would be my guess. What about everyone else?
Well, it's like what I explained earlier, just before the recording. I saw her a little bit more in the individuated state because she's had the confidence to break away from old patterns. She's got quite a few planets retrograde, so she is in a state of rebellion and individualization. So I feel like she may have earlier part of her life, if she was born into that consensus mindset, that she has stepped into the individuated. That's just my essence of her. And also because if you look at her moon sign as well, being in the 10th house Gemini, a moon in Gemini is a soul whose egocentric image has the ability to adapt to change and, to take self-responsibility, 10th house. So I feel like she's probably more individuated, but, this is just from what I've observed from her life and stuff.
Well,
Kristin, what would you...
Yeah, one thing I would say too, I mean, I was raised in a very traditional family, very traditional upbringing, and there were reasons that I chose that. And so just because she also chose that doesn't mean she is that. With Saturn on the South Node, I think she sort of punished herself and put herself there. I think she's further along than consensus for sure. I think the fact that she's drawn to Buddhist chanting, I would put her in the third stage individuated. I don't think you're going to be into Buddhist chanting in the first stage individuated, at least unless it's just dabbling with it. If it's beyond dabbling, and I don't know, I mean, if it's a real commitment to that, I might.
Which it is for her.
Yeah. Okay, then I would definitely put her further along, third stage individuated.
Okay. Yeah, so it's
But
interesting how we have to.
She's a genius. I mean, she's a genius. Like with her music, and she's just exceptional that way. So
Yeah,
she's been down some roads. We'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jordyn, Bess, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about her Mercury retrograde is one of the executives the first time they heard her sing said she sounded like screaming dirt, and it was like gritty and cool and interesting,
Screaming
And
dirt.
so I love that she has sort of a unique voice anyway that came onto the scene. And then not only that, this was the lifetime where she decided to recover her voice, and she did. And it was she had to learn how to kind of internalize that voice and not just she was as a Sag Sun, I think she was constantly on the go. She was rarely home. She was constantly doing shows. She was on the move. She had so much fire. It was like you can kind of disassociate if you're constantly doing. And I love that she figured out how to quiet the mind and, internalize. And as one of the, that Mercury being one of the rulers of her North Node, I think it really pulled her into, sort of getting toward that North Node place of finding balance in the mind and balance in her relationships. And she really did. She married Erwin Bach, who's was a sort of music executive that was a lot younger, that she met when she was, I think, 50, and he donated a kidney for her. And they've been together for a very long time, and they live a very peaceful life. And she really said she's got that sort of sexual vibrancy, but she wanted a balanced partner and not someone who was going to dominate her. And she found that. So she really, I think, pulled herself towards that North Node, really leveraging her Mercury retrograde. And I love that she took her story back too. I mean, Ike held the reins and held the story for a long time, and she decided what she was going to publish and how she was going to say it, and she found her truth, and that was that.
Yeah. You can see like that moon in Gemini, she's like had 2 lives, 2 partners in a sense. It's like the first life, the second life. At 50, she meets the second. That's amazing.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Did you know her second marriage was at the age of 74?
Yeah, they waited like years to get married. They were 20,
Yeah,
they were
yeah,
together
to have
27 years before they got married.
married, yeah. So
That's
she's
interesting.
she's a rebel in terms of breaking barriers and breaking stereotypes. You know, she's very much been true to herself.
One thing
Yeah.
About the partner, I remember seeing some footage of her in an interview where she was asked about love and her hopes for finding love, and her answer was simply that when she will attract the right partner when she has earned it. And so I think that we're seeing that because he's quite different than Ike was. He definitely is a validating force for her, and so that's beautiful to see that she's attracting a whole different soul with a whole different vibration, and one that just really celebrates her talents and her gifts and how she's special.
Yeah.
I just thought of something. A classic Pisces part of the archetype is sacrificing yourself for others. And so she sacrificed. I mean, Ike held back all the money of her career when she was with him, gave her nothing. And so she's, literally this icon on the stage, and he's getting everything. So she's sacrificing all of that, for this person called her husband. And then second husband sacrifices a body part literally to keep her alive. I mean, talk about bringing things back into balance. Talk about the extremes with Mars and Pisces in the 7th house. She has now experienced both sides of what it means to give and to receive.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 100%.
I thought it was interesting whenever I was like looking at Sag on her 5th. She's obviously been a singer and a dancer or honed in on these gifts, especially like the square from her Venus to that 2nd house Neptune. But there's like this thing that I feel that happens within there, the 5th house, 10th house, Leo, Cap stuff that goes on, which is, it's not talked about enough, but it's like in situations there can be a feeling of indignation when something happens, like an injustice. And with her Venus and Sag, it's like it had to reach that limit of her feeling that way to finally be like, I'm gonna go be me. Like if you look at how she dressed prior to her splitting and doing things on her own, she was very 2nd house Virgo, like very
conservative.
extremely conservative, like pearls, hands in the lap, and then whenever she came into her own with like this, fire energy, I think, and really felt like she could be authentic, she came out, she cut her hair off, she started looking very Leonian. It was very much in her authenticity. And I also felt like this was really interesting. And I think that this speaks so much to like this Sagittarian quality of intuition. And she was talking about how she came across Buddhism, which was, it was someone I had introduced her to someone, and this lady was like, I think that this will really help you. And she said that she kind of like put it off to the side. And then her son came home and was talking about this same type of, Buddhist philosophy. And I feel like that's just so interesting that whenever she speaks about family and her children, how she would almost, it was like they were kind of messengers for her sometimes about what route to go, like when to leave, when to stay. And it wasn't anything that they were doing intentionally. It was just by happenstance. And she was someone who was willing to look at the messages and receive them. So.
Yeah. Kristin?
Lilith.
Yes, because all things natural. Can't go without talking about Lilith.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So she obviously looks like a lion. She roars like a lion. Every time I hear a voice that I love, Saturn is nearby, or that Mercury might be in Capricorn. It's at that gravelly kind of, especially a girl or a woman with that gravelly voice, radio announcers, what have you. So she's got that Saturn on the South Node. But one of the things that I love that I read about her, and I wasn't surprised, of course I knew this, I just didn't realize the list of the names that were admitting to this, but a lot of men worshipped her. A lot of very famous men worshipped her, musicians. And, you know, Mick Jagger, of course, even by Beyonce is not a man, obviously, but a very powerful woman. Bono, Rod Stewart, Bryan Adams, David Bowie, and even Sammy Davis Jr. gave her a, what was it? A brand new sports car. At, you know, she wasn't getting any money. This was in 1970 because Ike was taking everything. I'm blanking on the name of what kind it was, but some convertible, some fancy convertible. They did a show together in Vegas, Sammy Davis Jr. with Tina Turner. And, you know, he gave it to her as a gift for performing with him. So who else is on my, Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. I mean, the list is so long and vast, but of course they worshiped her. She's just, you know, putting it out there like nobody's business. And I think really giving other women permission to just let loose, you know, let her rip, let it roar. And so, and to embrace their sexuality, their sensuality, their femininity, and to be strong in it, to be, that's so Lilith in a way at her essence. Undistorted Lilith is alluring, independent, wild, just out there in every way, in every natural way. And so I know somebody who has actually Pluto and Venus in the 12th house in Scorpio conjunct. And this, one of this soul's lessons, or not, well, it's a lesson, but it's something that has been an issue in relationship, is her need to be worshipped. Now, this isn't Tina Turner's need, but I wanted to share this because, you know, when you attract people that worship you, there's always this imbalance, right? I think Tina might have worshipped Ike, which is how she ended up in that relationship. But to understand that the Pisces archetype can be something that plays out, because we're projecting this fantasy, right, onto somebody. And maybe you're the person that wants that attention from somebody else. So it's not always, when you're looking at a 12th house Pluto with other planets there, it's not always that you're worshiping somebody else. Other people can be worshiping you, and plenty of people worship Tina Turner. So whether she wanted them to be worshipped,
that reminds me of is at that, on that, I think, Bess, I think you watched this, and maybe some of you guys did too, but at the end of that documentary, she says, you know, at some point, what's like fame and pride? She was like, when can you peacefully bow out? That's what that reminds me of, is like kind of not wanting that anymore. At what point can I just go and live my life and like just be a regular person, you know?
Well, I also think, I mean, some of that is her sun moon opposition too, where she didn't have any friends. She didn't have any strong like female friends, and she felt like people were constantly projecting onto her like the idea of her, and they didn't actually see her for her. And then when, you know, her book came out, then all anybody ever wanted to talk about was the trauma of Ike. And so nobody could see past that either. And then, I mean, to your point, Kristin, yeah, she changed people's lives by coming out with that truth. And she gave a lot of courage to a lot of people to do, you know, things that take incredible courage. But she never really felt like people got to see her fun, funky, spunky, you know, creative side and get to her root. And I think that's, some of that's, you know, that grand cross that she has, the sun, moon, Mars, Ceres, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, everything comes in layers and in order. For her, that number one, that the Saturn repeating was number one, the man who was in control, the man who was in charge. I mean, it's like putting a mute in a trumpet, in a sense. It's like changes the sound of the instrument. So she was really held back, and, you know, the way she was dressing, like you said, Jordyn, that had to be addressed first. That manhole cover had to come off first. And so, you know, we look at the Pluto placement, of course, you know, we've talked about all of what that means, but you have to go directly to that resolution node, directly to the Saturn. That has got to come first. And ultimately, as she evolves, she's got the North Node in the third, of course, in Libra. The ruler is that Venus in Sag, but everything comes back to all of her Sagittarian energy, which is to be honest, no matter what, to just like hold nothing back, nothing, no nipping, no tucking, just completely out with it all the way. That was her intention. to embrace her masculine and her feminine. That's the North Node in Libra, in one body. And she did that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and just before we close this, her Pluto polarity point, if you look at it, Kristin, is in the 6th house in Aquarius. So it's all about liberation and, you know, just breaking those barriers. And in transitioning, 6th house is a transition house, Virgo. And so it's just breaking away from the past, because like you said, I think her desire is to completely liberate in this lifetime and just move beyond, kind of take a leap of faith ahead.
I wrote
In her
down
soul's
something that
direction.
goes with that.
Yeah.
She said when she was introduced to Buddhism and that was a way out and helped
Yeah.
change her attitude, she said she became liberated. So I think that that's her actualizing that, what you're talking about.
I also think some of that's just her hard work. You know, like at one point with that 12th house Pluto, she could have really been overcome with all of it. And she was at one point. I mean, she attempted suicide with sleeping pills, I think, at some point. And instead, like, she just 6th house polarity point went to work. I mean, this woman can work like nobody's business. I mean, to do the number of shows she did, to be in high heels at 50 years old, dancing like a crazy person on stage. It's unbelievable. I mean, you can't listen to her or watch her without getting goosebumps. It's like, oh my God. I mean, nobody has the staying power or the ability to just get to work. Like, she didn't take a moment's breath after the divorce when she didn't have a penny. She didn't pity herself. She just went to the stage and did what she knew she needed to do. It's incredible.
I think she was relieved, man. 36 cents or not, like whatever the number. I mean, like, thank God
Really.
I'm out of this.
But still, like, it's still a mountain to climb up from underneath. You've got bills to pay and kids to feed, and it's like, okay, now I'm just gonna put on a showgirl costume and like get to Vegas, you know? It's like, all right, wow.
Well, she was like willing to risk her life to leave that relationship, because she said that she almost got hit by a truck whenever she left when Ike was asleep. She ran across the highway, and all she could hear was like the horns blaring, and she finally made it across. And like, talk about some past life stuff coming up in that moment. Holy crap.
Yeah, totally. She's on the run. Look at that, Mars and Pisces squaring her moon in Gemini and Mercury on the other side. Literally what you described is that. Horns, you know, she's running across the street trying to get away from. Yeah, that was a relive for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're sending Tina Turner a lot of birthday love. It is her birthday, so wishing her well for the next year as well. But yeah, thank you, ladies. That was amazing. And yeah, and just before we close, these were just some song titles that I really felt linked with some of her placements. Tell me if you agree with me or not. Like, you know, Ask Me How I Feel, the Moon in Gemini. You know, just express how you feel. Back where you started, I see that as a Pluto retrograde in Leo in the 12th house. A change is going to come. It's her Uranus, her retrograde planets in her chart. The woman I'm supposed to be. It's like she's always known who she wanted to be and had the strength and courage to go in the direction of her dreams. I'm going to break every rule. I love that one. And that really does depict her. And what you get is what you see. Like you said, Kristin, you know, the lion's mane and her whole appearance. And yeah, she really is embracing her authenticity and her naturalness in that. Yeah. Right, so just moving on, before we close, it's just a little reminder of a great book, especially linked to the natural astrology, written by some wonderful authors, some that are here today. Yeah, you can purchase this through Amazon. Yeah, if you're interested also, just learning more about evolutionary astrology, and learning it from the original Jeffrey Wolf Green School of Evolutionary Astrology, the link will be in the description. You can learn for yourself if you want to teach this material, become an astrologer yourself, whatever interest that you have. It's a great learning resource and a great learning tool. So come and join us on that website. And before we close, this is an inspirational quote that was found by Bess, thank you, by Dean Kuntz. And the message is, intuition is seeing with the soul. Very perfect for Sagittarius archetype. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great month.
Namaste.